Now, instead of a monologue, per se, what I'd like to do is introduce you to a story of a relative of mine from way back when, my Uncle Bruce. Now, Uncle Bruce, excuse me, was a maestro for the Wheeler-Barabak Philharmonic Orchestra. You've probably never heard of it. Wheeler-Barabak's like a middle-of-nowhere town, but by far and large, the best orchestra ever. Only problem was that Uncle Bruce was getting on in his old age and he wanted to retire. And he performed one night in front of a full house. It was always a full house in Wheeler-Barabak. And whenever he would finish his set, he would go out to the audience and he would bow and he would accept his applause and his accolades. And he would always have a personalised message to the crowd that came to see him. Now, of course, you may not have heard about the Wheeler-Barabak Philharmonic. They haven't been around since the accident. Let me just get into that a little bit more here. Trust me, it'll all make sense. Because Uncle Bruce was feeling like he wanted to retire, he went to the manager of the theatre and said he wanted out of his contract. Now, the manager of the theatre was like the tough, gruff, mafioso type, what's his name, Marlon Brando and The Godfather, sort of slides my Uncle Bruce's contract across the table over to him and says, "You got 6 years left to pay off on this. If you don't do it, I'm going to come around to your house and I'm going to break your legs." Well, Uncle Bruce didn't take to that too well, so what else could he do? He went to put on his next concert. Not quite a middle-of-nowhere town. It was a tour this time, so they sort of negotiated if he can get this tour finished, the manager would let him out of his contract. But the more he performed, the deeper and deeper into a depression he got. So one night, my Auntie Dot, they're having a bit of a chat over this, and he says, "You know something, Dot? I just can't do this anymore. Like, the music's just not in me anymore. And I know I get standing ovations, I get streamers and roses and everything you could possibly imagine that someone in my position could possibly want, but as a maestro, I just don't feel it anymore." So, Auntie Dot, which if you keep this between you and me, Auntie Dot used to work in the army. Couldn't say where, but one day she'll tell me. And she looks at Uncle Bruce and says, "Well, one day, maybe things will work out. You might find a little surprise waiting for you." Well, Uncle Bruce tended to think about what surprise meant. He went off on his tour, did his little orchestral thing. I think the town was called Buckenbanyel. Yeah. Anyway, he finishes up in Buckenbanyel, full house, huge accolade. Everyone loved the show. Except for Uncle Bruce, who went up to the crowd and addressed them solemnly. And keep in mind, before the concert started, he got a care package from my Auntie Dot, and inside that care package was a 9mm Glock.